My name is Isla. I'm 39 years old, and I live in a quiet neighborhood on the outskirts of Denver with my husband Miles. To the outside world, I'm a full-time housewife. But beneath that facade, I'm the owner and managing director of a high-end surgical equipment distribution firm, a company I built from scratch that now generates millions annually. Officially, I take home a modest $98,000 a year on payroll, but the business is worth far more. Miles, however, never had the slightest clue. We met when I was 28, at a friend's engagement party. Miles was magnetic, quick-witted, observant, and effortlessly charming. He noticed everything from the way I always tapped my fingers to jazz beats to how I scrunched my nose when thinking. I believed I had found the kind of man people write love songs about. After a year of dating, we married. For a while, I thought I had truly chosen the right partner. But reality began to surface soon after our vows. The warmth in Miles dimmed. His attentiveness faded into apathy. When I encouraged him to pursue better job opportunities as his current one barely covered our grocery bills, he resisted. One time, I offered to help him apply for a role in my company's operations department. It required only basic communication skills and a professional attitude. The position paid over twice his current salary. I even personally reached out to HR to hold the role open for him. But when I brought it up at dinner, he shot me a look of disgust. "You think I need my wife to find me a job? What am I, some kind of charity case?" he snapped. "Don't interfere with my life." I was speechless. How could the man who once left love notes on my windshield now twist my support into an insult? His pride seemed to balloon while his ambition shrank. Yet I held on. I convinced myself that as long as I earned enough to sustain us, we'd be fine. Each month, I transferred $10 into Miles's account as a personal allowance. He spent it within days: sneakers, tech gadgets, video game subscriptions, and then texted me complaints about rising costs and how life was crushing him. I knew where the money went. I just didn't have the energy to argue anymore. It wasn't about the money. It was his indifference that crushed me. He never once asked how my day was. Never noticed when I flew out at dawn and returned past midnight from business trips. To him, I was just a woman who spent his money, his idea of reality so warped, it would have been laughable if it hadn't been my life. I remember one afternoon, I had meetings from 8 a.m. until 2 p.m. straight. My mother, Diana, dropped by to help clean up the place. She knew I was swamped. When Miles got home and saw her, he scowled, dropped his keys, and muttered under his breath, "Another stranger in my house." I rose from my chair, fury boiling beneath the surface. "She's not a stranger," I said firmly. "She came to help us." Miles shrugged. "That's your opinion. I don't want people in my house all the time. I need peace." I turned away to hide the tears I didn't want him to see. That moment marked a shift. A crack in the foundation of our marriage that would never heal. From then on, the atmosphere changed. We still shared meals, occasionally watched the same shows, but it all felt staged, like we were acting out the roles of husband and wife without the love. Miles grew increasingly irritable. He'd blow up if the bed wasn't made right or if I forgot to refill the coffee machine water tank. One day, I came home from an exhausting investor presentation, still in heels, and he greeted me by throwing a wrinkled shirt at me. "You didn't iron this. Do you even do anything useful around here?" he barked. I remember letting out a hollow chuckle. There I was, the woman who had just sealed a deal worth 7 figures, now being berated over an iron. I didn't respond. Talking only gave him more fuel to twist my words and weaponize them. Even when I was bedridden with the flu, Miles stood in the doorway and said coldly, "Can you get better already? I don't have time to babysit." It was chilling. I realized then that I was sharing a home with someone who had no empathy left for me, maybe never had. My nights grew restless. I would wake up at 3 a.m., eyes fixed on the ceiling, asking myself, why am I still here? I, a woman who had built an empire, was withering under the weight of a loveless marriage. I didn't tell anyone, not even Diana, who had always been my shield in life. I told her I was fine whenever she called. I didn't want her to worry. I didn't want anyone to see the truth that I had failed at the one thing I had hoped would bring lasting joy. But I never expected that Miles would humiliate her in the worst way. It was a Saturday afternoon when my mother, Diana, came by again. She had made my favorite lentil stew, the one she used to cook when I was a child, and brought a basket of peaches from the farmer's market. We were chatting quietly in the kitchen when Miles walked in. He didn't greet her, didn't smile, just dropped his backpack with a thud and sighed like the world had offended him. Again. "There's always someone just sitting around here," he muttered, loud enough for us both to hear. My mother, ever the gentle soul, smiled despite her clear discomfort. "I'm just visiting Isla for a little while," she said softly, "not staying long. I brought her something to eat." Miles yanked the fridge open and grabbed a soda can, slamming it shut. Then, without even looking at me, he added, "I don't want to eat with strangers. Some people clearly don't know how to respect a man's space." I stood frozen, the bowl in my hands trembling slightly. My mother hesitated. Her hand, still holding the edge of the table, trembled. She gently set the fruit basket down and turned to me, eyes full of sadness. "I think I'll go," she whispered. I walked her to the door, barely able to speak. When she stepped outside, she turned back and gave me a long, searching look, one that said everything without words. I nodded quietly and closed the door. When I turned to face Miles, something inside me snapped. "Do you realize what you just did? How cruel you were to the one person who's always been kind to you?" I asked, my voice low, steady. He didn't even blink. "I was just being honest. If you can't handle honesty, that's on you." I stood there in the kitchen long after he walked away. The air felt heavy. The walls, once filled with laughter and late-night movie marathons, now felt cold, suffocating. The silence after that day became unbearable. Then came the moment I'll never forget, the day my body finally gave up. I don't remember the exact second it happened. Just that I was in the middle of a project review at work, the overhead lights starting to blur. The room began to spin. Then everything went black. When I opened my eyes again, I was in a hospital bed at Aurora General, hooked up to machines, an IV in my arm. My chest felt heavy, my skin clammy. A nurse was adjusting my oxygen mask when the doctor walked in with a clipboard in hand and a cautious look on his face. "You fainted from severe exhaustion," he began. "But there's more. Some of your blood work came back abnormal. We need to run further tests." 2 days later, the results came. A tumor on my pancreas, stage 1, but aggressive. I sat in silence as the doctor explained the treatment plan. Chemotherapy would start immediately. It would be a long road. Strangely, I wasn't afraid of dying. I was afraid of facing it alone. That night, I texted Miles. "In the hospital, need to talk." No reply. I called. Straight to voicemail. Not a single message. Not a single question. So I began treatment alone. The infusions left me cold. My energy slipped away. My hair fell out in clumps, and the metallic taste in my mouth lingered for days. I looked in the mirror and saw a different woman. Hollow, pale, but somehow still holding on. I lied to my mother, told her I was away on a long business trip. I couldn't let her worry, but the truth was I had never felt more alone in my life. And then, 2 weeks into treatment, Miles finally appeared. I thought I was hallucinating at first. He stood in the doorway, arms crossed, wearing the same smug expression I had grown to hate. I managed to sit up in bed, weak and weary. "You came," I whispered, my voice barely audible. He said nothing at first, just stepped forward and placed a manila folder on the table beside me. "I've filed for divorce," he said flatly. "The house and the Lexus will stay with me. I think that's fair. Well, I don't even know how long you'll be around." I blinked slowly. My body was too weak to shake, but inside I shattered into glass. He wasn't here to care for me. He was here to claim what he thought he was owed. I nodded once. "Take what you want," I said, voice like ice. "Thank you for stopping by." He stared at me, perhaps expecting a breakdown. Maybe he thought I'd beg or cry or plead for his love, but I didn't. I simply watched him walk out of the room. When the door clicked shut, a cold smile tugged at my lips. "You just made the biggest mistake of your life," I whispered. I reached for the hospital phone and dialed one number: Elliot, my CFO. A man I had trusted for over 6 years. One who had seen behind the curtain and knew what I was truly capable of. "I need you," I said. "It's time." His answer was immediate. "I've been waiting for this call." 3 days after Miles dropped the divorce papers on my hospital table like they were a final insult, Elliot walked into my hospital room. No flowers, no get-well balloon. Just a sleek leather briefcase in his hand and a quiet seriousness in his eyes. He set it down and looked at me. "Are you absolutely sure you want to go through with this plan?" he asked. I didn't hesitate. "Yes, I want everything to begin tomorrow." He nodded slowly. He understood. Elliot was the only person at my company who knew the truth that my mother, Diana, was listed as the legal owner of my firm, Horizon Surgical, while I operated behind the scenes as CEO. I never wanted the spotlight. I never needed the credit. I wanted privacy, simplicity, a peaceful life, something Miles never gave me. Looking back, I realize I protected him far more than he ever deserved. I signed his name onto joint accounts, added him as a co-owner to our house, let him take credit for my wins, just to make him feel important. But now it was time to take back everything he took for granted. The very next morning, a termination letter was sent to Trident Logistics, the company where Miles worked as a mid-level coordinator. The contract between Horizon Surgical and Trident had made up almost 70% of Trident's revenue in the last fiscal quarter. It was a deal I had greenlit myself after a pitch led by Miles, who had no idea the powerful partner firm he'd been so proud to charm was actually run by the woman he slept beside every night. I remember how cocky he'd been that week, boasting about how he sealed the biggest deal of his career, walking taller like he was some industry sharp. He had no clue I was the one who approved it from the master bedroom while sipping chamomile tea in my slippers. The termination letter was sent out at 9:00 a.m. sharp on a Monday. By 2:30 p.m., I received a direct call from David Lynn, Trident's CEO. He kept it short. "We're extremely surprised by the decision. May I ask the reason for the termination?" I answered calmly. "We've been made aware of troubling behavior by one of your employees' repeated misconduct, unprofessional communication with female staff, and suspected misuse of company assets. As a major partner, Horizon cannot overlook such things." There was a pause. Then he asked, "Do you mind telling me the employee's name?" I didn't hesitate. Miles Hartley. That night, Miles came home looking like a man who had just lost a war. He didn't say much at first, just dropped his phone on the table, opened the fridge, and stood there for too long. Finally, he spoke. "I was laid off." I nodded slowly, not even looking up from my book. "I know." He turned toward me, frowning. "How would you know that?" I stood up, walked over to the side table, and took out an envelope. I placed it gently in front of him. "Because I'm the one who terminated the contract," I said softly. "I'm the CEO of Horizon Surgical, Miles. That miracle deal you always bragged about? You pitched it to me, and I gave it to you. And now, I've taken it back." His mouth opened slightly, but no words came out. He tore open the envelope and stared at the documents inside, copies of the signed termination letter, internal memos, and finally, the official divorce response from my lawyer. "You've got 30 days to vacate the property," I said. "It's in my name, always has been. I just added yours to the deed because I felt sorry for your ego." I turned away, already done with the conversation. He followed me a few steps, voice desperate. "Wait, Isla. You can't be serious. You're the CEO?" I didn't answer. Just let him stew in the truth. "And the mortgage?" he asked, panicked. "I won't be paying it anymore," I said simply. "That's on you now. All of it." His face collapsed. The reality hit him like a freight train. The house, the car, the money, the life, all things he assumed were his, were never his at all. I left him there, standing alone in the kitchen, stunned and shaking. The man who once mocked my work ethic, who dismissed my exhaustion as drama, now had to face the empire he never knew I built and the woman who finally stopped carrying him on her back. I didn't hate him. Not anymore. All I felt was clarity. Miles had lived too long in a world I created, funded, and protected. It was time for him to survive without me and discover what happens when the foundation he took for granted is ripped away. Just 3 days after my lawyer delivered the official divorce response to Miles, along with the 30-day eviction notice, the hospital room phone rang near midnight. I had just completed another round of chemo and was resting in silence when I saw his name glowing on the caller ID. I knew it wasn't about love. It was fear. I answered and said nothing. "Isla," his voice cracked. "Please, just hear me out." I remained silent, eyes closed against the pale hospital lights, letting his voice break and flail. "I was wrong. I was so wrong. I thought you were just a bored housewife, just someone riding on my back. But you were everything. The reason we had a life. The reason anything worked at all." I didn't respond. "I've lost it all," he continued, his voice desperate. "The house they're foreclosing. I can't make the payments. Trident blacklisted me. And word's spreading fast. No one else will even interview me now." Still, I said nothing. "You don't understand," he begged. "The car's gone. I sold it just to pay my credit cards. They're calling nonstop. I'm staying on a friend's couch in a place that smells like old sweat and mold. I need you." I turned my face slightly, watching the shadows dance on the ceiling tiles. "A chance?" I said at last, my voice calm, detached. "You had 10 years to love me, respect me, care for me. You chose not to." "I know," he stammered. "But we were happy once, weren't we? Please remember that, please." I let the silence stretch before asking, "Do you remember someone named Layla?" Everything on the other end of the line stopped. I could hear his breath catch, just slightly. How do you know that name?" he whispered. I smiled faintly, my voice sharpening. "The CEO of Trident called to apologize. Turns out they investigated an internal HR complaint. A 24-year-old intern named Layla Warner, daughter of the regional VP in Chicago. No, Isla, it wasn't like that. She was just..." "Stop." My voice cut like a knife. "She wasn't just anything. I know everything. The late work nights, the receipts, the hotel key cards, the flirty messages, the selfies all taken in Trident's office." "No, Isla, please. It was stupid, a mistake. It didn't mean anything." "You're right," I said coldly. "It meant even less than I thought." And then I hung up, not angrily, just done. I immediately emailed Eliza, my lawyer, requesting a no-contact clause added to the divorce, and began preparing a civil suit under Minnesota law for breach of marital duty. With clear evidence of infidelity, I could pursue emotional damages, and I had more than enough proof. The next morning, Eliza arrived with a thick file. Screenshots, emails, time-stamped messages, even selfies of him and Layla in a hotel hallway, all geotagged, irrefutable. I filed for 85, 0 in emotional damages, she said. He'll contest it, but the court will be on your side. I didn't smile. I didn't need the money. I needed dignity. I was discharged shortly after temporarily for home rest under nurse monitoring. During that time, Miles tried to contact me over and over. Emails, messages, social media. He even showed up outside Horizon Surgical, unaware that security had already been briefed to never let him through the gates. Each new attempt confirmed something vital. He didn't love me. He just didn't know how to live without me. I sat at my desk in my new apartment, a modern, airy space with no shadows of our past, and redrafted all my financial plans. There was no longer a category for husband's expenses. I gave Elliot the green light to begin transitioning Horizon's operations over to our incoming COO so I could step back, rest, heal. One evening, as I stood on the balcony of my new place overlooking a quiet lake, the breeze brushing my short, regrowing hair, I realized something profound. I didn't miss him. Not even a little. He had drained me of joy for years, and now I could breathe. News of Miles' downfall traveled fast through the local business scene. Whispers turned into warnings. Trident Logistics had quietly severed all ties, and word spread that his misconduct had been documented and flagged in internal HR bulletins. No company wanted to hire a man associated with a harassment scandal, let alone one who burned bridges with a major corporate partner. He tried applying to smaller firms, even out-of-state branches, but his reputation preceded him. Eventually, he moved in with an old high school friend in a shabby apartment complex on the outskirts of Brooklyn Park. He sold the Lexus RX, once his pride and joy, for a fraction of its value, just to pay off one of his 4 credit cards. The same cards he'd used to buy collector sneakers, console upgrades, and over-the-top restaurant meals. Always under the illusion that the bills didn't apply to him. He began working the night shift at a shipping warehouse, sorting packages for minimum wage. The job was brutal, physically draining and humiliating for someone who once called himself a logistics strategist. Late-night calls from collections agencies replaced his alarm clock, his inbox flooded with overdue notices. No more online shopping carts, no more self-indulgent purchases. The walls of his borrowed room echoed only with regret. As for Layla Warner, the intern, he risked everything, for she vanished from all public platforms within days of the scandal breaking. One of Eliza's paralegals later told me that Layla's family had agreed to a quiet, private settlement to avoid further embarrassment. Word was, her parents had sent her back to their family's Iowa estate, cutting all ties to the internship and her city life. It was over quickly, decisively, and without ceremony. Meanwhile, I was regaining my strength, slowly but surely. My final treatment ended on a brisk autumn morning, when the doctor reviewed my test results and smiled gently, saying, "You're clear." I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just smiled and quietly whispered, "Thank you." It felt like the first breath I had truly taken in years. 2 months later, I returned to Horizon Surgical, but I wasn't the same Isla who once rushed between client meetings while answering texts from a man who never appreciated her. This time, I walked into the main conference room with my head held high. Everyone stood and clapped. Elliot handed me a white ceramic mug that read, "Welcome back, boss." For the first time in a long time, I felt home. Not in a house, not with a man, but in my purpose. In the following weeks, I received more than a few romantic messages, former colleagues, acquaintances, even a few charming suitors who'd followed my story in local business journals. But I said no to all of them. Not because my heart was closed forever, but because for once in my life, I was enough. I bought a lakeside cottage in Duluth, surrounded by pines and soft winds. Nothing extravagant, just peace. A home that smelled like cedarwood and morning coffee. No voices yelling from other rooms. No one criticizing the towels or the temperature of the soup. It was mine. And no one entered unless invited. One lazy Sunday, I was pouring green tea on the porch when Elliot came by with a folder of transition updates. We sat watching the lake shimmer in the golden sunset. A long, comfortable silence between us. After a while, he asked, "Have you thought about getting married again?" I smiled faintly, the breeze tugging gently at my hair. "Not right now. Maybe one day. But today, I'm good." He nodded, not pushing further. The air smelled of pine needles and damp earth. And for the first time in over a decade, my heart felt quiet. Not empty, not aching, just still. A few weeks after I'd returned to work, I received a final message from Miles. It was a desperate, sprawling email sent at 2:37 a.m. The subject line simply read, "Please." He'd written about his pain, his shame, his loneliness. He claimed he was suicidal, that no one would hire him, that he hadn't spoken to his parents in weeks, that the world had turned its back on him. "I still dream about us," he wrote. "I still remember the way your hair smelled when we danced in the kitchen that night after your first big contract. I was stupid. I ruined everything. I need you. I don't deserve you, but I need you." I didn't reply, because I had already done enough saving, and he had already done enough destroying. Instead, I forwarded the message to Eliza, who added it to the growing file of communications we would submit in court. The emotional damages case was progressing, and given the evidence, the judge had already indicated sympathy in pretrial remarks. I wasn't seeking revenge. I wasn't looking to ruin him. I was reclaiming myself. And I wouldn't apologize for that. A month later, the court finalized the divorce. The settlement included full rights to the home, which I had already sold, a 78, zero damages award, with collections scheduled through garnished wages, a no-contact order valid for 5 years, public court records available upon request. That last part, I knew, would seal his fate in every future interview. After the ruling, I sat on a bench outside the courthouse, staring at the sky. It was gray, the clouds heavy with unshed rain. But I felt light, so light. That same afternoon, I walked into a small jewelry shop and quietly sold my wedding ring. The buyer complimented the cut. I said nothing, just took the cash, folded the receipt into my purse, and left. Later that week, I changed my legal name back to Isla Morgan, a name that no longer carried the weight of his failures, a name that belonged solely to me. In the following days, I reorganized my company's leadership chart. Elliot officially became president of operations, and our newly hired COO took over most of my day-to-day tasks. I remained CEO, but in a quieter way, stepping back, delegating, and trusting the structure I had built. And for the first time, I began living instead of just enduring. Each morning, I walked the lakeside trail with a thermos of cinnamon tea. I read novels I never had time for. I hosted dinners with old friends women who had once whispered their own marital struggles, thinking they were alone. I told them, now, you are not alone. You never were. One evening, as golden leaves swirled down from the trees, I stood at my back porch watching the still water, my fingers wrapped around a warm mug. I thought about how far I had come. From hiding in hospital beds, waiting for a man who never showed up, to this, stillness, clarity, peace. It wasn't victory that filled me. It was relief. I had survived. Not just cancer, not just betrayal, but the long, quiet war of loving someone who never truly loved me back. As autumn melted into winter, I kept to a rhythm I had never known before, calm, unhurried, free. There were no alarms screaming for early flights, no texts asking if I'd picked up almond milk, no one sulking in silence because I'd worked too late. For the first time in over a decade, the only voice I had to listen to was my own, and she was steady. She was alive. I started writing again, nothing fancy, just thoughts in a leather journal. I titled the first entry, "The Day I Stopped Apologizing." It was the day I stopped shrinking to fit someone else's insecurities, the day I let go of a man who drained me dry and called it love, the day I realized self-respect isn't selfish, it's survival. Rumors about Miles kept coming in waves, some from mutual acquaintances, others from employees at Trident who still occasionally reached out. Apparently, his termination notice had been quietly shared across the supply chain sector. His name now floated in corporate circles with a single note attached. Unreliable. Reputational risk. He'd been blacklisted from every partner firm in our network, even the ones he hadn't applied to. No one wanted to take a chance on someone whose downfall had become public knowledge and legal precedent. The money from the car sale dried up quickly. The small savings he had left were eaten up by rent, late fees, and bounced utilities. He tried rideshare work for a while, but was suspended after too many low ratings, likely a mix of poor attitude and self-pity. He had always needed someone else to prop him up, and now, with no one left, he was drowning. I didn't gloat. I just moved on. As for Layla, the young woman who'd once laughed in hotel elevators and sent secret office selfies, she was gone from every social channel. A whisper from Eliza told me her parents had packed her up and brought her home to a quiet corner of Iowa, away from the wreckage. No lawsuits, no headlines, just quiet shame. And me? I was flourishing. My health continued to improve. Every follow-up showed progress. My body, once ravaged by chemo, had begun to heal stronger, leaner, sharper. My hair had returned, soft and wavy, and I no longer avoided mirrors. I had come back to myself. Not the woman I was before Miles. Not the woman I was during him. But someone new, someone whole. One bright spring afternoon, Elliot visited the cottage again. We sat by the water, sipping tea and listening to the loons. "You know," he said, If you ever write a book about this, you'd sell out in a week. I laughed, really laughed, something I hadn't done in so long. Maybe I already am, I said. One page at a time. He smiled. Well, just make sure I get a signed copy. We clinked our mugs like wine glasses. I didn't know what the future held. I didn't know if love would ever find me again. But I knew one thing for certain. I would never again be less than I deserved. Not for comfort. Not for peace. Not even for love. The final lesson came to me one evening as I stood barefoot on my porch, watching the stars ripple over the dark lake surface. Resilience doesn't come from strength. It comes from rising again after you've been shattered. I had been loyal to a man who didn't value me, had poured myself into a home that never gave anything back, had loved in silence, hoping effort could replace respect. But now I knew better. I didn't need a savior. I became my own.